And whether you're shooting a shot easy, medium, or hard, your backstroke should always be the same slow tempo. Here my backstroke is too quick, which usually results in an abbreviated backstroke. Some top players will have a noticeable pause at the end of the backstroke before beginning the forward stroke. This pause at the end of the backstroke requires practice to perfect the timing. You want the pause to become second nature before playing in competition. You never want to have to think about the mechanics of the stroke when playing tournaments or leagues. And the more common type of pause is the natural pause. And this pause occurs naturally as the backstroke slowly finishes and then begins the forward stroke. Similar to someone throwing a softball or horseshoe, their backswing slows down and transitions to the forward swing. It should happen naturally without having to think about it. And as the player begins the forward motion, the grip pressure should remain consistent. The speed of the forward stroke should gradually ramp up to prevent any tightening of the grip hand. The cue stick should be accelerating on the forward stroke, reaching the optimum speed at impact with the cue ball. And even though the cue stick will slightly slow down when contacting the cue ball, you still need to keep the stick moving forward through the cue ball, staying as level as possible through the impact area. And here's why it's important to have good follow through. One issue that many players have is that they lock up their grip at impact. And here's an example of what I mean. I'll put a ball in the spot and shoot it into the corner pocket. As the tip strikes the cue ball, instead of the stick driving through the cue ball and gradually coming to a stop, it immediately stops at impact with the cue ball. So in order for the stick's momentum to come to an immediate stop after impact with the cue ball, the grip hand needs to begin tightening up just prior to contact with the cue ball. And here you can see my grip hand tightening up on the forward stroke, anticipating stopping the tip at impact. This change in grip pressure just prior to striking the cue ball may cause the stick to go off the shooting line, causing a mishit. And some players who have this issue will sometimes begin stopping the cue stick's momentum just prior to impact with the cue ball. And being able to follow through correctly will remove this hesitation in your stroke. Also, you'll notice that some players have a significant elbow drop, while others have very little elbow movement during their stroke. And ideally, you want as few moving parts as possible when stroking. The more moving parts means the more things that can go wrong. All the parts have to be in sync with each other when performing the stroke. Players who have a significant elbow drop usually develop this stroke when they were first learning the game, so it's become part of their muscle memory to drop the elbow. And even players who have a compact stroke may drop their elbow a little bit on certain shots, like stretch shots, or on certain power shots. Having a significant elbow drop on shots, however, requires many hours of practice to perfect the timing. Some players who try to manufacture an elbow drop on shots will sometimes drop their elbow slightly before impact with the cue ball, which results in a mishit. If you wish to employ an elbow drop into your game, be prepared to spend extra time on the table perfecting the timing. And one issue you're going to have to watch out for if you have minimal elbow drop is not putting the tip close enough to the cue ball when aiming. Here we can see that the tip of the cue isn't very close to the cue ball. The problem with this is that when we perform the stroke, our optimum speed is reached right here. So this speed is to be maintained until the tip can reach the cue ball. But if the tip is too far away from the cue ball, the stick may be slowing down by the time it reaches the cue ball. Practice trying to get the tip pretty close to the cue ball, usually less than 1 cube of chalk away. Also, by putting the tip closer to the cue ball, you're going to have a much better chance of hitting the cue ball where you're aiming. And when you're aiming, your eyes will be going back and forth from the object ball to the cue ball. And when everything looks like it's lined up, you can go ahead and stroke the shot. Now, some people look at the cue ball last. Their focus is making sure they strike the cue ball where they are aiming. But the majority of players look at the object ball last. They feel more comfortable being able to see the shot while stroking. And other players will look at the cue ball during the backstroke, then their eyes shift to the object ball as the forward stroke begins. This usually results in a more noticeable pause as the backstroke transitions to the forward stroke. Find the way that's comfortable for you. If you're not comfortable looking at the cue ball last, then focus on the object ball. There is no wrong way to do it. You just have to find the way that's comfortable for you. So if we put it all together, here are the steps. And we begin by placing our back foot on this shooting line, either at a slight angle or at an angle closer to 90 degrees. Next, we step into the shot with our other foot. The foot will be parallel with the shooting line or slightly turned in. Also, create your bridge before you get down on the table. The fewer things you have to do once you're on the table, the better. As we then bend forward onto the table, we move our hips back to provide clearance for our stroking arm. As we place our bridge on the table, it becomes the third part of our tripod, along with both legs. When done correctly, we should have clearance for the stroking motion. We apply slight pressure to the cue stick as we perform the backstroke. The cue stick should drive forward through the cue ball and slowly come to a stop on or near the table felt. And here's a great drill to help you fine-tune your stroke and stance. Place a ball on the spot and imagine the shooting line from the center of the ball to the center of the pocket opening. We're now going to create our stance using this line. Create your bridge while standing, then slowly bend down onto the shot, keeping your head on the line. When you're down on the table, your forearm and grip hand should be hanging naturally below your elbow. On your backstroke, pull the cue all the way back and concentrate on a smooth transition between the backstroke and forward stroke. Allow the cue to slowly accelerate, reaching proper speed at impact. Keep your head still until the ball reaches the pocket to prevent any unnecessary movement. Although moving your head has no effect on the shot after you strike the cue ball, if it becomes a habit, your body will then begin to tighten up in anticipation of the head movement prior to striking the cue ball. And on some shots, your head movement may begin during the early part of the forward stroke, which will affect where your tip strikes the cue ball. So it's a good idea to exaggerate how long you keep your head down while you are practicing. And when you do the stroke drill, since you don't have to worry about pocketing a ball or playing position, all of your focus can be on your stroke and your stance. You can now monitor your mechanics for any problems, such as, is your forearm turned inward or outward? Is your wrist turned? Is your backstroke too fast? Does your thumb turn on the forward stroke? And do you follow through on a straight line? The first step in improving your pool game is understanding your game. And not just how you play the game, but the actual mechanics of your stroke. And when some of my students first start doing the stroke drill, their follow through is either too short or it's off the line on one side or the other. When you do this drill, you want to follow through keeping the stick above the shooting line. Your tip will either land on the felt or slightly above it. And for some of my students, it takes a few hundred shots before their stroke begins to follow through correctly. Both your backstroke and your forward stroke should stay on the shooting line. It may be a good idea to stand up every 4 or 5 balls and recreate your stance. Now, if you're one of the players who tends to tighten up at impact with a cue ball, it's going to take a few shots before you're able to follow through naturally. A good idea is to mark a spot on the felt about 6 inches beyond the spot on the shooting line. Now when you shoot the ball, try to force the tip to stop on this mark or stop right above it. In the beginning, you may have to manually force the tip to this mark, but after a few hundred shots, your tip should start to land on this mark automatically. Your focus should be on a consistent grip pressure throughout the stroke and avoiding the tightening of the grip at impact. Once the stroke and stance start to feel more natural, you can try a variation on this drill by throwing balls out on the table and just shooting them one by one. This allows you to practice your stance with various types of shots. And if you're new to the game of pool, you may want to shoot just one ball until you get your fundamentals down. The problem many new players to the game have is that they begin trying to pocket balls right away, and their focus goes away from proper fundamentals. So they may begin to develop bad habits. Remember, to become a strong pool player, you have to learn the game in steps. First fundamentals, then ball pocketing, and then position play. Here's the first do or die shot. These are shots to try when you don't have any other options. Okay, we're playing a game of 8-ball, and we're shooting the 8, but we don't have a good offensive shot. See if you can figure out a way to pocket the 8-ball and win the game. And here's a hint, we're going to pocket the 8-ball without touching any of the stripes. Okay, this is a shot that's pretty difficult, but at least it gives you a chance to win the game. So I'm going to call the lower left corner pocket. I'm going to shoot the 8-ball and hold my cue ball where it is so the 8-ball can carom off it. And the great thing about this shot is that even if you miss the shot, you may still block the pocket for your opponent. Here's another version of this shot. In this version, the 8-ball and cue ball are farther away from the corner. So in this situation, I have to draw the cue ball back and off the side rail so the 8-ball can carom off it. In this last example, the cue ball and 8-ball are pretty far away from the corner pocket. See if you can figure out another way to pocket the 8-ball in one of the 2 corner pockets. Okay, so in this case, I need to follow the cue ball and time it out so the 8-ball can carom off the cue ball and go in the lower right corner pocket. In this situation, I'm no longer straight in on the 8-ball, but if I can bank the 8 into the 9-ball, it may carom into the corner pocket. This shot comes up every once in a while, so it's a good shot to know just in case. Here I'm playing 8-ball and I'm on the 8, but I left myself in the jaws of the pocket so I can't see the 8-ball. In this situation, I would aim toward the point of the pocket with center high, and this will send the cue ball toward the other corner pocket. This is a worthwhile shot to practice because this situation does come up every once in a while, and it at least gives you a chance to hit the ball, and sometimes pocket it. And it even works along the length of the table, although this is much more difficult. In this situation, I'm playing a game of 9-ball and I'm on the 2-ball. The problem is that when I shoot the 2-ball, the cue ball will run into the 7-ball, leaving me tough on the 3-ball, which is at the other end of the table. But since my cue ball will be striking the 7-ball immediately after hitting the 2, I can use the 7-ball to carom the cue ball to the side rail and down to the other end of the table. And I was shooting the 2-ball with low right. So when the cue ball strikes the side rail, the right hand spin will help bring the cue ball back to this end rail. Here's another example of playing position off a ball. I'm playing 8-ball and I'm on my last ball. The problem is that the 8 ball is next to the top end rail, so position on it will be difficult. But next to the 1 ball is the 13 ball, and since the cue ball will be running into the 13 ball after pocketing the 1, I can use that to my advantage. If I can strike the 1 ball with low right, the spin and draw will bring the cue ball back for shaping the 8 ball after striking the 13. And if you're ever confused about what spin to use, later in this video I'm going to show you an easy way to figure out if you need to use left or right spin. In the final example, I'm playing 8 ball and I'm on the 1 ball, but I have to bring the cue ball all the way back to this end rail for position on the 8. And when I pocket the 1 ball, it looks like I'll be running into the 9 ball, which means I can use the 9 ball like a rail. So when I shoot the 1 ball, I'll use a power draw stroke to bring the cue ball off the side rail for shaping the 8 ball. Here's another do or die shot. I left myself here on the 8 ball and it doesn't look like I have a pocket for it. See if you can figure out which pocket I make the 8 ball in. This shot actually comes up every once in a while, and it's a great shot to know